So long ago, they say that there was a man who had a herd of cattle, and each cattle was white with black spots like night and day. And he loved these cows. He treated them very well, and they gave him sweet cream. Oh, and he loved it. And so every day, he would go out and he would take the cattle out, these cows, and he would let them graze in this thick, sweet green grass, and he'd find pastures to take them to, and then he'd bring them back at night, and he would lock them up safely, and he would go to bed. And at night, he would sleep, and he would dream of sweet cream. And so one morning, he woke up, and he found that when he went out to his cows, their udders were dry, and they didn't give him any milk or sweet cream. And he was mad at himself. He was like, I must not be taking good enough care of these cows. And so he took them out and he searched really hard till he found these thick, long, sweet green grass that he would let them feast on. And then he brought them home at night. He locked them up safely. And when he got up the next morning, the cow's udders were dry again. And so again and again and again and again. And so finally he became suspicious. And so one night he took the cows out grazing. He brought them home at night. He locked them up safely, and he went to his room, but he didn't go to sleep. He pretended. And he came back down to where the cows were kept, and he found a hiding space, and he just began to watch the cows all night if he had to. Till eventually, a star began to rise high above the cows. And the star stopped above the cows, and down from that star came a bright ladder. And many beautiful women began to climb down this ladder, and each of them descended from the sky carrying a basket of tightly woven reeds with a close-fitting lid. And when they got to the ground, they all split up and went among his cows, and they milked his cows until their udders were dry. And when they were done, they started to climb back up the ladders, and he finally snapped out of his enchantment, and he ran to where the women were at and where the ladder was at, and he grabbed the ankle of the last woman, and he held her, and he wouldn't let go. And the other women went up the ladder, and then they looked down at their sister and finally pulled the ladder up, and she was left, and this woman fell to the ground and fell to the earth. And he said to her, "Woman, you've taken from me. You owe me." And she said, "You're right. I'm sorry. I'll stay here. I'll work for you, and I will repay this debt." And he said, "That's fair." And so they worked together, and they cared for the cows, and never again were they bothered by thieves during the night. And then the day came when the man went to the woman, and he said, "Woman, you've paid your debt. You're free to go, but if I could have my way, I would choose that you would stay and you would be my wife, for I've grown to love you in our time together." And she said, "I was hoping you'd say something like that." She said, "You're a kind man, you're a good man, and I would be happy to be your wife if you will make me one promise." And he said, "You name it." And she said, "As you can see, I carry with me from the sky a basket with this tight-fitting lid, and you must promise me that you will never look in the basket unless I first bid you to." And he said to himself, "Woman, you're so silly. This is such a little thing." And then he said to her, "I promise." And so they were married, and soon together they grew fat on sweet cream, and they enjoyed it together. But do you know how it is with a secret? It just started nagging at him. And day and night, that basket just sat there in the house. Never was it mentioned. Never was it open. And the man began to think, what's with the basket? And so he started thinking about it, and he thought, she's my wife. It's my house. That's my basket. And so one day when she was out and he was in, he went to the basket and he opened it. He pulled the lid off, he opened the basket, he looked inside, and he started to laugh. He just started laughing, like uncontrollably. He started laughing until the wife heard his voice from outside, and she came back into the house and saw that he had opened the basket. And he said, wife, what were you afraid of all this time? She said, husband, you've broken your promise. But what were you afraid of this entire time? That I might see? That I might discover? What was the secret that you held in such fear and me such distrust? I looked inside of the basket and there's nothing to fear because there's nothing there. The basket is empty. Women are so silly. And she said nothing. She put the lid back in her basket. She picked it up. She walked from their home, and she was gone. And after that, whenever the man was sleepless, he would walk out into the night under the stars, and he would stare up into the sky as if he was looking for something that he had lost. Now, parables are stories with a spiritual point. Jesus would tell parables. Folk tales are something different. Folk tales, often you read a folk tale and you're like, what's the point? Like, what is that all about? And people sometimes talk about it, well, and sometimes there's a very clear, and here, children, is the moral to the story. Other times people debate about it because it's like, there's so many things that happen, and what does that mean? Well, there are some disagreements on what this means. People interpret it different ways. What does this Zulu tale mean? What went wrong with this fairy tale relationship? Now, some will say he made a promise and he broke it, and that's why she left. A promise is a promise. Others would say, though, she had a secret. She never trusted him. She let fear destroy their marriage, and that's why he peaked. Every spouse over time wants to be trusted. So what does the folk tale mean? Well, I have a theory, and in preacher fashion, you're not going to hear it till the end of the sermon. But I'm going to tell you my theory on what went wrong with the fairy tale relationship. So this week we're starting a new series. It's a 4-week series called Helping People Win. And it comes from Momentum's new slogan, new tagline that we adopted last spring. And basically it means just that as a church, as a spiritual community, as a team, as the body of Christ, as it's described in Scripture, we want to serve people the way that Jesus served people. Jesus didn't show up saying, hey, I'm the Son of God, feed me grapes, serve me. He said, I didn't come to be served. I came to serve. And he shows us the servant heart of our God. And so I'm pumped about all 4 of these topics: helping married people win, helping singles win, helping exhausted people win. And Music Express said, amen, brother. Can I hear it? You know, so helping exhausted people win, and then helping people win spiritually. And whenever I talk about a group of people, this is what I want to challenge you with, is whenever I talk about a group of people that you wouldn't consider yourself a part of, like, I know I'm not that, or maybe I don't know if I am that, can I just kind of nudge you to say, instead of getting grumpy about it, listen to me, church people. Instead of getting grumpy about it, like, that's not, I'm not that, because a lot of times, married couples, all this church cares about is married couples. Don't care about a single people. They don't care. And then single people, you know, kind of the same way, or married people the same way. I don't care about singles. I don't give a crap about no singles. I got a marriage to take care of. I don't care what single people go through and say stupid stuff like they're single for a reason, and they get all grumpy, and all this kind of stuff goes back and forth. Exhausted people. I don't care about exhausted people. I'm a hard charger. And so whenever we talk about or to a group of people that you feel like you don't fit into, I would ask that you be patient and humble and prayerful and help us as we try to help them win. This series and the mentality isn't saying, okay, we the preachers, me and Curtis, the other preacher, we want to bless these groups of people and help them win. This is about we Momentum Church. We want to help love people like Jesus loved them, serve people. We as a church want to help them win. Married people, single people. One day we might cover topics in the same series title: helping addicts win, helping victims of abuse win, helping women win, helping single parents win, helping students win. Who knows? It's endless options. But just try to be prayerful and be like, man, this is my job, is to help this group of people win, right? And so that is our goal in this series. So today we're kicking off with helping married couples win. So if you would, turn to Proverbs chapter 5. That's why I got this tattoo. You can download a Bible app for free. or grab the paperback Bibles at the end of the rows and turn to page 514. And so we're going to look at the book of Proverbs, chapter 5. And the book of Proverbs is from a genre called wisdom literature. And there are a few books in the Bible considered wisdom literature or wisdom lit. And that was a common genre in the ancient Near East, which is kind of the era and the area that we're talking about. And wisdom lit is usually just chock full of statements by wise sages. You know, wisdom and virtue and godliness is described. And so much of the book of Proverbs was written by a guy named King Solomon, who is imparting his God-given wisdom on his readers. And so in this chapter, what's really cool is we're going to overhear a father having a man-to-man conversation, a man-to-man talk with his son. So if at any point you're like, well, why is he focusing on this gender or why this? Because the scenario is father to son, man to man, and that's what the chapter is. And so the father is passing on wisdom to his son. This wise father, this godly father, wants to help his son win in marriage. And so there are two possibilities as to the marital status of the son. I mean, one, it could be, as you read through it, oh, clearly the son is married. But it could also be that this is a young single son, and as a father is bringing up his son, he's casting a vision for him of the kind of man he should be if he's married one day. When you're married one day, this is a vision for who you should be, what kind of man you should be to be wise and godly. So students, single adults of any age, listen carefully to the wisdom of Proverbs 5, because maybe you didn't have a godly father growing up. Or maybe you had a godly father, but this was real cringy to talk about like sex, and he felt really awkward about it, and talk about marriage and romance, so he didn't say a word about it. And so maybe you didn't have a father that was godly and open about conversations like this. And so let this father give valuable advice to cast a vision for you of what it means to be the kind of man or the kind of woman that he's describing here, if God leads you to marriage one day, which isn't the case and scenario for everyone. But wouldn't it be great to have a father who imparts this kind of wisdom and doesn't pull any punches and is godly and wise? And so this father's man-to-man warning, I'm going to give kind of the spoiler as we go into it, is this. He's warning his son to avoid the temptation to hook up with anyone besides his wife. And so, like, if you're going to be married, son, affair-proof your marriage. Everything you can do, being responsible for it, you affair-proof your marriage. You're making the promise. You're saying yes to these vows. You affair-proof your marriage. So take a look. Proverbs 5, verse 1. He says, my son, pay attention to my wisdom. Turn your ear to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion, and your lips may preserve knowledge. Then he says, for the lips of the adulterous woman, they drip honey. Now, he's not talking, as we'll see in the next statement here, about the kisses of an adulterous woman. He's talking about the words of flattery. He says, for the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is as bitter as gall, or she's as bitter as wormwood. And that's the contrast to the sweet honey that she talks in her flattery. Sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. Now, he may be saying literally, like, this will kill you, okay? It'll kill you spiritually. There might be an angry husband involved. He'll kill you dead. He'll kill your face, you know, that kind of thing. So it could be that, or it could be hyperbole for just saying, she's going to lead you to a ruined life. And if you're dumb enough to follow her, your life will be ruined. Verse 6, she gives no thought to the way of life. This is sad. Her paths wander aimlessly, but she does not know it. Think about that. Sadly, this woman that he's describing is someone who just doesn't know how unstable her life is. And she's pursuing, flattering a married man. And there are unstable men too, right? But in this case, it's a father talking to a son, and he says, this woman's unstable. She doesn't even know it. And so, verse 7, now then, my son, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you lose your honor to others and your dignity to one who is cruel. Okay, pause there. We're going to go back into chapter 5 in a minute. But this wise father, and the entire book of Proverbs, by the way, in general, they won't let us forget this lesson, and the lesson is this. With sin and unwise decisions, there is always an afterword. She has words of flattery. They're just sweet like honey. But in the end, bitter as gall. Like, sure, you can indulge in foolishness, or as Proverbs calls it, folly. You can choose to be a fool for some pleasure temporarily, but there's always an afterward. And a good dad passes on to his son, remember, these secret trysts, these rendezvous, these liaisons, these hookups, they lead to consequences of pain and destruction. It's funny, nowadays there is a new meaning for the word thirsty, right? So younger people know, and older people are like, yeah, right. Please tell us, Dan. Please tell us. So if someone's thirsty, okay, it means that they're desperate, they're thirsty for love, you know what I'm saying? They're horny, okay? That is the definition for thirsty, is like, that girl's thirsty, you know, okay? That's what that means. Now, everything has sexual meaning nowadays, doesn't it? I mean, when I was in high school, I felt like everything had sexual meaning. Like, okay, be careful. As a preacher, I'm like, everything I say could have double meaning. Be careful of everything you say. Everything you say could end with a statement, that's what she said. Okay, I know. Everything has sexual meaning because we've taken all these metaphors, but this is one that is not new. This metaphor is not new, and watch carefully as we go to verse 15, where the father says, my son, drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your springs overflow in the streets, your streams of water in the public squares? Let them be yours alone, never to be shared with strangers. May your fountain be blessed. And then the dad drops the metaphor and he speaks plainly. And may you rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. Now, this is describing the exquisite gracefulness of a loving wife. And in fact, in ancient times, women were often named after pretty and graceful animals. In fact, one of those preserved names through the ages is Tabitha, which means gazelle. And so ancient names for ladies often went poetically to the animal kingdom for grace and beauty. A loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breast satisfy you always. And may you ever be intoxicated with her love. May you ever be drunk in her love. May you ever be captivated and captured by her love. Now, I want you to notice these metaphors, okay? Drink water from your own cistern, Dad says. From your own well. May your fountain be blessed. All these represent the son's wife. You made a promise, a covenant, with this one woman, okay? If you have a thirst for romance, if you have a thirst for adventure, if you have thirst, you go to one woman that you have committed yourself to, and in that day, wells, you know, the hole that you would bore into a ground to get to a spring underwater, or cisterns, which was, you know, kind of a tank or a reservoir that collected water, they were privately owned. So this is a beautiful metaphor because those were always privately owned. That was someone's well, okay? That was someone's cistern. And so they were very valuable and they were privately owned. So otherwise, this dad is saying, son, your wife, like water, is the only woman you should ever look to or pursue in order to satisfy any thirst that you have romantically, sexually, pleasure, for adventure, whatever it is. And so this wise, godly father has instructed his son, you go to one place, your own cistern, never with any other woman. And the father also focuses in on the son's responsibility. Not just, hey, there are women out there who would offer your thirst to be quenched, even though they know with those sweet, flattering words that you're a married man. But he says to the son, verse 16, should your springs, son, should they overflow in the streets? Like, should you satisfy the thirst of any other woman out there? No. You have a woman at home to love. You have a woman at home to focus on, to satisfy, to exclusively say, this is the one. And so here's the deal. In any relationship that you want to improve, and of course we're focusing on married couples today, but in any relationship that you would want to improve, the mature thing to do is to say, I'm going to focus on myself. You can make excuses all day and you can point fingers all day. Well, he doesn't. Well, she doesn't. She never. He never responds. You can go on and on. They this, they that, or whatever. But don't point fingers. Own your part and say, man, if I want this relationship to improve, the only thing I control is me. I can only control myself. So what's your part? What's your responsibility? And focus on yourself. And today, here's what I want you to focus on. Here's the main point. You are the only legitimate source of romance in your spouse's life. This is a way for you to kind of own that, okay? Man, if I want us to win as a couple, I have to just own what I can own right now and understand that you are the only legitimate source of romance in your spouse's life. Now, when I perform weddings, I change a lot of material, some different wedding messages that I'll give. I might swap out the unity candle for the unity sand ceremony, you know. And so I might switch out the scriptures. But one thing I always say in every wedding I do is I say, bride and groom, as you make these promises today, I would encourage you to never stop pursuing each other. Never stop pursuing each other. Why? Well, here's why. Because romance is in the pursuit. Romance is pursuit. Romance will thrive in your marriage as long as you constantly pursue each other. Now, why is this advice so important? Why do I keep it in every message to these newlyweds? It's because when rings are exchanged, most married couples are tempted to think that they don't have to pursue that spouse anymore, that they're caught. And so the temptation is, even if they know it in their head, is, well, I can kind of ease back now. I can stop doing the things I did at once to pursue this person, and I can kind of kick back and, Bundy it, and stick my hand in my pants and watch TV and start making smart comments and being less encouraging, be a little bit of a jerk and all that kind of stuff. But romance is pursuit. And so you have to pursue each other. Nothing could be further from the truth that person is caught and the pursuit is over. Romance and marriage thrives as long as you constantly pursue each other. Never-ending love means never-ending pursuit, so you have to continue the pursuit. So you would do wise to remember that you are the only legitimate source of romance in your spouse's life. And that's why I love that the Father uses this phrase. I've kept this phrase in my mind. It comes to mind so much that in Proverbs 5, the Father says to the Son, this is the wife of your youth. Man, I love that. There's something so beautiful and poetic, so artful about that phrase that this woman, it could now be a father talking to a middle-aged son. I mean, this is advice that is constantly good to give, that this is the woman that has been with you since you were young. Like this father's describing the joy and the fulfillment of a long-term, deep, monogamous, I'm never going to give up on us kind of marriage. Like I'm just never, ever going to give up on us. I'm going to pursue you. This is the wife of your youth. I remember there's a couple at our last church when we lived in the D.C. area for 8 years. There was this couple that at that time, we were in our 20s, my wife and I, Shannon, and there was an older couple. I'm afraid to know how old they are at this point in my life, when you're like, oh, they're so old, the older couple. Now I'm like, oh, crap, I don't even want to ask how old they were then, okay? But their names were Danny and Linnell Dias. And there was this very simple picture of them, godly couple. They loved Jesus. They had many kids, flocks of children, like cows, everywhere. No, that's not true. It's a bad thing to say. But just had flocks of them, And so they loved their kids. They're great family, godly people. And every Sunday, if you saw them coming to church, they'd come from the parking lot, and Danny and Linnell Dias were holding hands, interlocked fingers, walking into the church. And it really stuck out. People noticed it all the time. And it wasn't like they're in the car. Okay, we're about to step out in front of church people. You ready for this? All right. Can we get it together for just a second here? All right, you've been like this in my ear the whole way here. Can you shut the pie hole for 30 seconds? Showtime. And they walk in. It wasn't like that. I was like, man, this is so sweet. They've been together a long time. We all know it. And they love each other. Like you can tell they're pursuing each other. They're being the source of romance for one another. And it was just a cool thing to look at that and be like, they're much older than us. They're probably like early 40s, you know. They're much older than us. But man, they love each other. And the dad is saying, my son, find pleasure in a fulfilling lifelong marriage. Like, pursue that. She's the wife of your youth. Pursue her. You know, when Shannon and I first got engaged, I lived in Louisville, Kentucky at the time doing an internship. She lived right across the river in southern Indiana, was working at a place over there. And I remember one time getting up in the morning, getting ready to go to work, doing my internship at this church. And I turned on the TV, and there was this woman, this older Jewish woman named Ellen Kreidman talking. She's a relationship expert. And she was selling here goes my age, some cassette series on relationships. Shut up. And it was like, here's a cassette set for him that only he should listen to. Here's one for her. But she would drop bits of advice that was like, here's some things that I tell guys. Here's some things that I tell, ladies. And she she just kept dropping knowledge, man. I'm like brushing my teeth. Like, that is good. I've never heard anything like that. Is really, dang. Man, if I focused on that, I would be an awesome husband. She just kept dropping knowledge. I was like, I'm ordering these cassettes. I can't even afford this stuff. I will sell all my hip-hop albums. I'll sell everything. We are going to get this series. I'm going to give that to her, give it to me, because this is such good stuff. But one of the things I'll never forget she said, it was like in jest, but in a serious point, she said, women, don't start pointing fingers when I say this, but women, maybe your husband's going bald. He can't help that. We don't need finger pointing or anything like that right now. But maybe your husband's going bald. He can't help that. But she said, woman, you better learn to love that man's bald head. Like, even if at first you're like, oh, I don't like a bald head. I like flowing glamour band hair. That's what I love. Ellen Kreidman said, I'm telling you, woman, you better learn to love that bald man's head. You better learn to love it good. She said, you know why? Because if you don't, some other woman will, and she might tell him. Right? The words of flattery, they're like honey. She might say in jest, joking around, hey, I think a bald head's sexy. Who cares what anybody else says? And he's like, I think my wife hates it. She never says anything. She said the word sexy about me since about 3 weeks after we were married. You better learn to love that bald man's head. You better learn to love it and cherish him. Be like, man, these are the things that I do find sexy about him. Lean into it because someone else might flatter him with words. And it goes the same for both spouses. Go down the list. If you have a husband of your youth, the wife of your youth, it's just so sweet to have this long-term monogamous, I will never give up on us kind of relationship. But you better learn to love that gray hair. You better learn to love that baby weight, those stretch marks, those love handles that he has, those wrinkles, that gravity. Okay? He says, may her breast satisfy you always. May his love handles, may you just grab a hold of those things and slow dance with him at the next wedding reception that you're at. Okay? Just hold those things tight. May they satisfy you. May you acquire a taste for everything that the wife of your youth becomes, everything that the husband of your youth becomes. Because why? Because you are the only legitimate source of romance for your spouse. And typically, if you don't pursue your spouse or provide romance, someone else will try. I'm not saying they'll be successful. I'm not saying your husband will give into it. I'm not saying your wife will give into it. They may be godly. They may be locked into you. They may take a promise serious, but they will try. Do you want to bank on that? That you starve them of encouragement and romance and love, and when other people try, that they won't give in? This father's like, no, son, the wife of your youth, delight in her. Be attracted to her and focus on her in every way you can. Husbands, if you don't pursue your wife, somebody else will. I'm not saying she'll give in, but somebody else will try to provide the romance that you are not providing for her. So you better flirt with her, or somebody else will. You better surprise her with gifts, or somebody else will. Now, you don't have to do all this stuff, but figure out what her love language is that she speaks and do some of that stuff. Because if you don't praise her publicly and privately, somebody else will. If you don't post things about her on social media, eventually somebody else will, and they will block you from it. So right now, some men are like, I need to make an account. I don't even have a Facebook account. If you don't make time for her, somebody else will. If you don't tell her that you think she's sexy, somebody else will. If you don't send her flowers, somebody else will. If you don't take that woman out to dinner, somebody else will and won't complain that it's too expensive. If you don't listen to her when she talks, somebody else freaking will. If you don't make sacrifices to help that woman win in whatever God is calling her to do with her life, somebody else will gladly say, I'd make those sacrifices. And right or wrong, somebody else will. So pursue your wife, because you are the only legitimate source of romance for your spouse. So be her source of romance. Whatever that looks like for her, find out and be that. You know, here's some quick ideas. None of these are new to mankind. These are things that I often have to be reminded of, and we have seasons where they get more difficult for us, and we're like, hey, man, we got to focus in on that because in this season of life, it's gotten more difficult to do that thing. But make it a goal to have 2 overnight getaways a year. Sometimes we get to the end of the year and we're like, man, we fought for it. We got one. And dang, it just feels like so long before we get another one. It's just the two of us, you know, hanging out, doing things that we love, or going and being quiet, or walking around places together, and just enjoying, being at Amish country, or Easton and Columbus, or a bed and breakfast. You know, in a few years when the kids are older, I'm hoping Shannon can start traveling with me again when I go to speak at retreats or conferences or conventions. Make it a goal also to have a rhythm for date night. You get to choose the rhythm. It's up to you, okay? You get to choose the rhythm. You know, you might say it's going to be every week, and you might be at a stage of your life where that's totally okay. You're empty nesters, or you don't have kids, or you got a great babysitter, parents live by, whatever. But make it a goal to have a rhythm, and you get to pick the rhythm. For us, it's often been like dinner in a coffee shop, you know, where we sit down afterward and just get a chance to hang out and talk. You know, but we've done many a date night in Tremont, in Coventry Village, Chagrin Falls, East 9th Street. Clevelanders, get to know your city. Can I rant a little bit? The only people in the world that don't know how awesome Cleveland, Ohio is tends to be the people that I talk to that live in Cleveland, Ohio. What's Coventry Village? You've never been to Coventry Village? What's Tremont? You've never been to Tremont? Dude, explore with your spouse this awesome city. There's so many great neighborhoods and suburbs and places to go. Do things like go to the Cleveland Art Museum. It's dope and it's free. Go to the Botanical Gardens. It's dope and it's not free. Go to a Cavs game. Those are pretty cheap right now. Go to the zoo. I mean, there's so many things. But if you have young children and money's tight and you don't have family living around you, try to find another couple at Momentum in your Mo group. This is a great thing for Mo groups usually, that might alternate free babysitting with you. So that your rhythm is every other week we go on a date. Every other week we babysit kids who are probably similar in age to our kids because we've matched up with this other couple. So every other week we get free babysitting when we go out. You know, that's a great thing for a Mo group. It's one way we can help each other win, is that we can kind of say, hey, what if we did swap babysitting for date nights and that kind of thing? We've even had single ladies help us win as a couple, as parents, by occasionally providing free babysitting for us. Like, hey, I'd like to give you guys a free night. Like, dang, man, that's you being generous and helping me win. Like, that's overwhelming in a cool way that sometimes singles are like, hey, you're married and I want to help you win. When we lived in the Washington, D.C. area for 8 years, we had a Mo group, if you will, a small group where most people were kind of in the same stage of life with really little kids. And we would each, as a couple, just accept that droves of children would come to our house one week and like on a Friday night, and they would all come in and they'd swinging from stuff and building forts with stuff that they weren't supposed to touch. And it was really fun because our kids had something to do, right? And the kids would play and have fun, and we really enjoyed it. But you would provide that babysitting for one Friday night, and then for like 3 or 4 Friday nights, you get free babysitting to go out and go on a date. And we're like, man, this is really, really incredible. And over the years, after all these date nights, it really hit me one day how psychologically this was affecting our marriage. Really, it's like, man, when we look at date night, we're like, we look forward to this thing that's coming up. Like, we get to be together and eat some awesome food. It doesn't have to be expensive food, but it's going to be good food that we agree on. And so, man, this great food, man, and we pause from the stress of work and the pressures of parenting. We get some peace and quiet, which for parents are like, peace and quiet, you know. And then we get to have this time where we look forward to being together, where a lot of times in marriage, he walks in the room and you get angry, like, I'm so sick of looking at his face. Him and his stupid laugh. Him and that stupid stuff he wants to talk about. I don't care about species of birds. Shut up, man. And there's that thing that pops up that just builds over time. But when you think about date night, I was thinking about how what happens in bad relationships as they're declining, it was like the exact opposite happening for us. I would long and look forward to being with my wife alone on date night, having fun, flirting, encouraging each other, and sharing stuff that we learned. You need to create this kind of space for one another in marriage because you are the only legitimate source of romance for your spouse. So date your spouse. Ellen Kreidman, that relationship expert, one of the things she always said is, okay, if you, thinking of Proverbs 5, if you are a person of risk and adventure, and you're like, man, the thing about the hookup is not the other person, the woman, the attraction, the sex, it's the risk, it's the danger. Ellen Kreidman's like, okay, if you need adventure, danger, then have an affair with your spouse. Meet up with your spouse at a hotel room, drive separately, have a one-night stand with your spouse. There's your adventure. That's the wife of your youth. It's your own well, your own cistern. You provide romance and adventure for one another because you are the only legitimate source of romance in your spouse's life. You know, when it's warm out, both months in Cleveland, Shannon and I will go for walks. Often our kids will come with us, and now we've kind of gotten to the point where we just go so often, right after dinner usually, that the kids sometimes are like, we don't want to go on another walk, please. So sometimes you'll be like 1 or 2 times a week. We'll be like, hey, you come with us. You walk 1 lap around the big block, which is about a mile. Then you guys can go back home, do what you guys want to do, and we're going to keep walking. And so we'll go on these walks together and we'll talk. And one of the things I've learned just from that and from our date nights and talking at coffee shops is that both Shannon and I are sapiosexuals. Now, if you look that up in the dictionary, what that means is it's someone who finds intelligence as an attractive quality. It's like, man, I really connect with you when we talk about things. It's really important for us because it brings to light, like, we need to talk about, what are you reading? What are you learning right now? Like, what are you studying? Or what is your mentor teaching you? Or what, we talk about other things too, like how'd your day go? What sucks right now? Those kinds of things too. But these things I started realizing over time, we both did, this is important for us. Now, not everyone is a sapiosexual, okay? It's not like, hey, that doesn't do anything for me to like have these conversations about what I'm reading. I hate reading. I'm not big on learning. So if your spouse isn't an intellectual, but you are, remember, you were attracted to him or to her for other reasons, okay? And so for you and your spouse, it might be cooking together. It might be working out together. It might be hiking together, gardening together, playing games together. But you need to figure out what is that, because that's important for us to know how to connect and how to pursue each other with that kind of stuff that we both love and have in common, because you, my friend, are the only legitimate source of romance for your spouse. And I'd love to coin a new term. I don't know that this even makes sense, but the new term I'd like to coin is sanctosexual, and that really means a person who finds godliness and spiritual growth attractive. Like sanctos, it means set apart, holy, godly. And so that's something that, I can't help it. I like big Bibles and I cannot lie. Like, she's so holy. But my personal strong conviction is really that the best way for you to win in a marriage is to put Jesus at the center of it. Like, it's just my totally unbiased opinion here, is that is the way that you win spiritually. If you pursue Jesus together, the result is that you have deeper spiritual connection. And these godly principles that you're going to go over and over throughout your life, and you'll hear from preachers, you'll read in books, you'll see it in the scripture, they're going to be things that constantly reinforce these things like pursuing one another, like Proverbs chapter 5. This is it. Focus on the wife of your youth. And the relationship gets richer and richer because of that. And so when you have Jesus as the main person that you are pursuing, it's like an isosceles triangle, where the more you pursue Jesus, the closer you get to one another because you are both pursuing Jesus. Bottom line, I think this is the number one knockout point to win in marriage. Pursue Jesus together, and you're the only legitimate source of romance in your spouse's life. So do that together. You know, there's an episode, I don't know if you're a fan of Friends, old episode of Friends where Ross and Rachel, they're the couple that's on and off throughout the whole series. They're broken up. We were on a break. Now we're back together, all this kind of stuff. And so in one particular scene, they're in a coffee shop together. They're talking alone on the couch. One of their buddies, Chandler, is off in another part of the coffee shop. But lately, Ross has been really jealous and threatened by a guy named Mark that Rachel works with. It's a long plot, comes up several times. And so he's really jealous of this guy, threatened by this guy named Mark, who really seems like he's flirting with and interested in Rachel. She's naive to it, and he's ticked about it. He's super jealous. So they have this kind of DTR relationship where they're talking on the sofa, defining things. She's like, I'm not interested at all. And he's like, you know, my ex-wife Carol, I was with her for 8 years, and I ended up losing her. I've only been with you 1 year, and I think I'm afraid of losing you to someone else the way I lost Carol to someone else. And I think I love you even more than I love Carol. So they really kind of hash it out. She tells him, you got no reason to be jealous. Eventually, Ross gets up. He says, I got to get going. I have to go pick up Ben. We got a play date this afternoon. And it turns out that woman that he has a play date with is a stripper. And she says, you have a play date with a stripper? And he's like, yeah, as it turns out, she has a boy about Ben's age, his son. And so we're going to take the kids to a Gymboree class together. She says, oh, okay, that's cool. Is the stripper married? He says, no. Oh, okay. She takes out a sugar packet as she's making her coffee. And you can tell it really bothers her. Is this a problem? Are you jealous of it? No. She's clearly lying. Clearly not happy by this development. But Ross, as he turns to leave to go to his play date, Rachel jumps off the couch and runs to him and just lays this big, wet, passionate kiss on him. And after the kiss, Ross can't even speak. He's just like, and he turns and he walks out the door and he goes to the play date. And Rachel smugly walks back to the couch, and Chandler meets her at the couch, and she says to Chandler, she says, well, there's a kiss that he won't forget for a few hours, you know? And Rachel sits next to her and says, yeah, either that or you just turned him on and sent him off to a stripper. And man, I think that's such a beautiful image of the danger of Proverbs chapter 5. Like, that's what the world is nowadays. It's just like water flowing in the streets. I mean, anywhere your spouse goes, it's like you have to worry that he's going out there and there's all these cisterns he could be drinking out of. There's all these flowing waters she could go to that are in her workplace. I mean, let's be honest. There's strip clubs. There's internet porn. There's sleazy apps where you can hook up with strangers. There's workplace affairs. There's old flames that contact each other on Facebook and social media, and they reignite these old flames. They're like, wow, it's just nonstop. And so Proverbs 5 is this thing to say the responsibility is on you. You focus in on the spouse of your youth. You be the only source of romance in his or her life, because why would you let your springs flow to the public streets with strangers, with people that aren't the one that you committed to? And Proverbs 5, just to be honest, was a huge inspiration to me for a couple of reasons. Over the years, I have learned to trust Shannon more fully, inspired by Proverbs chapter 5. And it also helped me, and it was part of the reason that I was inspired to eventually gain freedom over an addiction to pornography I had since I was in middle school into our marriage. And the two things I learned or experienced, I guess, from Proverbs chapter 5. One was from my application, and one was from my wife's application. And the first was that at the height of my past addiction to pornography, I just had a point in my marriage where I wanted to have victory over that. And I just decided to make every effort to pursue Shannon. Like, she is the wife of my youth. Like, I love our story together. And how much of a better husband could I be if I focused all my romantic energy and my love and speaking her love language by acts of service, which is her main love language, and just if I pursue her and I focus all my energies on her, because that's my sister and that's my well, that's my springs. I've promised to her that she would be my only source for romance and that kind of intimacy. And so I decided to do my best not to waste my energies on whether it was mental fantasies or porn or any other woman around me that might try and flatter me. And I decided to focus all my energies on this girl that I met the beginning of freshman orientation in college. And I acknowledged, okay, I need to be the only legitimate source of romance in her life. And then the other part of that was this. I did not trust girls when I dated them in high school. I was like Ross was with Mark. I was always jealous, fearful, never trusted them. That's what I always saw around me in relationships. So I just didn't trust. In high school, my girlfriend didn't trust him. In college, including Shannon, and we broke up a couple times, and I dated other girls, but even Shannon and I just didn't trust them. Just did not trust them. But I can speak from personal experience about receiving this kind of devotion also that's described in Proverbs 5. Like, my wife pursues me, and the result is that I've grown to trust her in a way that I never would have been able to picture in high school or college. We've been married for 23 years, and I confidently say, constantly throughout those years, there is not another woman on earth who has a chance with Dan Smith. Because my wife pursues me, and I love her, and I pursue her, and the source of romance, she's being that for me, and I'm trying to be the best source of romance that I can for her. And so Proverbs 5 has really been an inspiration to point back to and to say, man, that's the kind of guy that I want to be and apply that godly wisdom. Now, the Sky Woman folktale, when you hear that, you can ask the question, what went wrong in this fairy tale relationship? And some would say he made a promise and he broke it. Others would say, man, she had a secret and she never, ever trusted him with it. And I agree with both of them. I think they're both insights, valid points. But being a man, I'm like, I want to take responsibility for what I can take out of the story. What is the point for me being a man? So I look to the man and I see, I think the reason that this fairy tale relationship didn't work, the reason that she left him is because when he opened the basket and when he looked inside of the basket, he saw nothing there. And the deal is there's so many people in this room who are married who are like, man, I married the wrong person. I got the gamble wrong. I didn't win the lottery on this one. Look at other people who are so happy. They're so happy. But I want to tell you, your spouse has something special. Like, your spouse possesses treasures, and the truth is often that you are too blind to see those treasures. You don't see them. And I'm telling you, you better learn to love that bald head. I'm telling you, you better learn to love the things that she's passionate about and talks about all the time. You need to block out all other fountains of romance and open your blind eyes and start noticing what is special, what is valuable about my spouse who I've promised to be with till death do us part, who I've covenanted with, to say, I will be with her. And my perspective as a man, just to pass on to other men, is to say my wife, my bride, is a sky woman. She is a heaven-sent blessing, an absolute gift of mercy from God to me, and I need to see the treasure that she possesses. May your marriages win. Focus on Jesus, pursue Jesus, love each other, pursue each other, and win.